Really grew up in a small town north of Sioux City, about 18 miles north by a town called Merrill. You go skinny dipping in the Floyd River and they have your tree houses in a small town like Mayberry. That's what it was like in the 50s.
Life in rural Iowa is a place unto itself. I mean, you're not in the big cities, you don't have all the traffic, you don't have all the noise. It's kind of a simple way of life. If something needs fixing, then you fixed it. If something needs to be welded, you welded it. If you didn't know how to do something, you learned how to do it. And so you become self-sufficient in many respects.
The way I grew up and the way I am today was because of my born and raised on a farm. In 1931, it was a very poor time. There wasn't any money. Food was hard to get. We were fortunate with farmers. We had eggs, milk, and meat. We always grew a big garden. My mother and I really did most of the garden work, and I was not very old at the time, but I could help out too.
From my earliest memories, my dad was a sergeant in World War I, and he had trained at Camp Dodge. And there was a trunk, a brass-bound trunk in the basement that contained his uniforms and his field gear, his pack, entrenching tool, canteen, cartridge belt, all that good stuff. And I just loved, as a boy, to wear that. The helmet covered my whole head, and the pack reached from my shoulders to my feet. But I loved being a soldier, and to this day, I love soldiering.
One day, Warrant Officer Freeze came from the A Company from Lamar's to do a presentation at our high school. And at that time, I was a sophomore. And so I became interested, thought I would do that. And so I had to wait till I was 16. And so as soon as I turned 16, I enlisted.
I, Kenneth Miller,
do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
Well, I wanted to buy a car. Didn't have no money, couldn't save no money, didn't really have a job. And a friend of mine had joined the Guard. And so I went down there one day with him and stuff, and we started talking about me joining. Went and talked to the AST that was on duty at that time. I told him I was 17. So he said, well, if your folks sign the paper, then we can take you in. And I was only actually 16, so. He gave me the paper and I took it home and I had a pocket watch that my dad liked. So I was talking to him and I said, you sign my paper so I can join the National Guard, I'll give you my pocket watch. So he signed the paper. Then my mother signed it too then, so that's how I become a Guard member.
You knew you were going to get drafted, just a matter of when. So I had made a decision that whoever the first recruiter calls me, they get me. So I get a call from the Army National Guard. They sent a car out the house and picked me up, took me down to the armory. They asked me if I wanted to be a tank driver or a chaplain's assistant. And I said, I want to drive a tank.
So I wouldn't get drafted and sent to Vietnam. That's why I originally joined the National Guard. Well, I can remember on the news, there was always pictures every night. There'd be something on the news about Vietnam.
That it's on a main infiltration route into the South.
Really didn't understand what was going on until we got there.
This is a CBS News special report.
I've always thought that I would join the military. Ever since I was in high school, I always wanted to do that because my dad was in World War II. He had two brothers that were in the service. So I just thought, you know, I wanted to be in the military also. in 1964. Either you got drafted or you joined, and I thought, well, I think I'll join the Army National Guard.
What's fascinating about this is it was never part of a master plan on my part to become a soldier. To become a mechanic, yeah, I was interested in that. Three of my buddies and I, then we said, well, let's sign up.
I can enlist you right directly into a diesel mechanic school.
I was not 18 yet, so I had to take a form requiring my parents' consent that I join the Guard. My mom said, where do I sign? Her brothers that were in World War II. She didn't have a second thought about it. Dad said, you sure you want to do this? I said, I am. Meanwhile, all I've got for assurance is three of my buddies in high school said, I'll just go ahead and join.
Well, say it's almost graduation time. What happens to you guys now?
It was a good reason I joined was because they told us when they was recruiting us that they had a school that you could go to, a mechanic school. And that was really, that really made me happy because I was always wanting to know about cars and stuff like that.
You know, it was by pure accident that I got into the Army National Guard. I went to Heelan High School here in Sioux City, and I didn't realize I had to go down when I turned age 18 to enlist for the draft. The guy's talking about having enlisted and all this kind of stuff, and I thought, well, geez, I probably better get down there myself. I wanted to go to the military. That was my era. Vietnam was our time. I left the office there and I went down to the Army National Guard Armory and signed up then.
It was regular Army basic training. I was sent down there by myself. I rode the bus all the way to Missouri from Sioux City. And it was my first experience being away from home by myself. And back then, your serial number wasn't your Social Security number. National Guard was NG and regular Army was RA and draftee was US. And they pointed out to the regular Army and the draftees, get together with the National Guardsmen because some of these people have already driven the equipment, they already know about the equipment. The regular Army usually kind of frowns upon the National Guard, but that was the first time I had heard it, and that's probably the last time I had heard it.
The Guard was in a situation where it was not fully staffed. We were what they would refer to as cadre staffed, and so that was at about 55% strength. The whole concept was to have the officers and the NCOs in a corps so that if we were mobilized that they could bring in the privates and stuff and put them into the squads and fill it up.
In '65, we were assigned to the Selective Reserve Force. There wasn't any doubt that when you finish this training, you're going to be called to active duty.
The requirements were it had to come to full strength. We couldn't go out and enlist those individuals and send them to basic training in AIT. The only way that it could be done is to take another battalion and strip out the needed strength from that battalion. And we took some individuals out of Corning, Atlantic, and various other units within the 168 Infantry Battalion. Your training was accelerated, so we had 2 weekends a month that we had to go to the drill, and then it was a 3-week annual training period.
But there were other drills wedged in there to prepare for the weekend drill. We had to have all our weapon qualifications done, and so we had to go to Fort Riley, Kansas, to fire crew serve weapons. And so we had to have support people come in on Thursday or Friday to buy the food to take to Fort Riley. We were National Guarding continually, all week long, 2 weekends a month. And for many people, it was 4 weekends a month. And it was just a hectic period.
There was a map of Vietnam in the armory, in our platoon room, and underneath it said, "Don't laugh, you may be there someday." This was in 1966, and it came true in 1968.
So we're going down the road, you know, doing our job, and one day the media came through the front door and said, "We understand you've been mobilized." And we said, "We haven't heard anything about it." And so Major Burkhead got on the phone and called the Adjutant General and said, "Is there anything we should know? Because they're telling us we've been mobilized." And they said, "Well, there's nothing we can tell you at this point in time." And so we kind of hung in balance for a couple of hours, and then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon they called us and said, "Well, we couldn't say anything before, but officially you're mobilized."
I was sitting in a cafe with my girlfriend in downtown Sioux City, and I saw it on the news that they were mobilizing the 2nd Mech for duty. Uh-oh. You kind of resented it, but you know, we were also going to do our duty, you know, just like everybody else. We were called to do our duty, and we were going to do it.
I'm a student at Morningside College now. I get a call. My mom said, "A Company is called." Well, at the time, that's my first knowledge that we were being mobilized for active duty.
Upon being activated, we started doing extra calisthenics and stuff like that, and running around the compound area of the armory.
They came from Sheldon and Cherokee, Ida Grove, Mapleton, Lamar's. But it took close to 100 out of each one of those communities. And in the smaller towns, that really hurts, especially on the farm. A lot of family farms lost the eldest son. However, when we were mobilized, we suffered a disastrous loss of personnel. And they said in April, if your discharge is before the beginning of the new year, you may get out now. We were just absolutely stunned. But we lost 31 key NCOs. And suddenly guys who were team leaders became platoon sergeants. That's a big jump from managing 4 people to 40.
The way I understood it, if you had more than 6 months, you could be sent to Vietnam. If you had less than 6 months, you wouldn't go. I had 6 months and 14 days, but I was kind of happy I was going because I wanted to go over there.
How can you not participate in a war if it's during your time, you know? And a few others volunteered to go then. I had a station wagon and I had stuff clear up to the front seat. Well, I had my records there, and she took them down and looked at them. And she opened them up and looked, and the first paper was saying I volunteered for duty in Southeast Asia. You know, so that's when the war started. Well, I talked a little bit to start with, but didn't do no good. Then I didn't talk the rest of the way home. I just listened, you know.
There were 13 of us that were not branch qualified. And we were all infantry guys, and so we were basically told, you're going to Fort Benning. Said, now you can agree to go to Fort Benning right now, or you can wait and be mobilized on 13 May of 1968 and then go anywhere in the Army. And we said, you know the answer to that. We're going together. So he said, okay, the plan is you report to Fort Benning in 3 days. So 13 of us just literally stopped what we were doing and headed to Columbus, Georgia.
Well, what a humongous task that was, because 913 people in the battalion, big battalion. We had to process all the records and do all of those things that you have to do to get the unit ready for deployment. Shots and everything.
And then came the movement order. Send your tracks by train, drive your wheeled vehicles, and the people will go by air, by chartered air. I went down to the rail yard to check on the loading of our track vehicles. I was talking with one of the railroad guys, and he said, we're going to need the keys to your vehicles, the padlock that locks the hatch on top. And I said, well, we've got the keys, and we'll see you at Fort Carson, and we'll unlock the vehicles when you get there. And he said, these vehicles aren't going to Fort Carson. And I said, they're what? He said, no, my train orders are to send these to Fort Hood, Texas. So we ran to the armory and checked at higher headquarters. They said, that's true. Your vehicles are going to Texas, and you are going to Fort Carson. Fort Carson was to be the mobilization station prior to deployment. The Army, Department of the Army, had issued to us a ICTP, a 9-week intensified combat training program. And we would institute that. At the end of the 9 weeks, we would deploy to wherever they sent us. And we could not institute it because we didn't have our tracked vehicles. This was the beginning of the United States Army treating us like dirt. On the day the truck convoy was to arrive, I went down to the gate. There was a bird colonel there, and protocol demands that the lower rank report to the higher. So I went over and reported to him, and he said, oh, you're with this guard outfit that's coming on post. I said, yes, sir. And he said, how many vehicles you got? And I said, right at 60, sir. And he said, how many have you left on the side of the road, or are you towing? And I said, well, I don't know that for sure, but I would say none. And he said, he sneered, yeah, right. And then he walked over and talked to some of his buddies, and they all looked at me and they all laughed, a good hearty laugh. So they were talking about us. Well, through the gate came our people, all in one big massive stream. And the last guy in was Sergeant Bowerly with the wrecker. And so I walked alongside him and I said, Sergeant, how many vehicles? He said, we got all 60, sir. And I said, they're all under their own power? And he said, they're all here. So I walked over to this wiseacre and I reported again, sir, and I said, sir, all 60 of our vehicles are on post, all under their own power. And he just stared at me and walked away.
So we arrived at Carson and began our training. And one day we heard that they were bringing a bunch of armored personnel carrier shells back from Europe, and that they were going to be used as targets on their artillery ranges. And so when they arrived, they said, your tracks are here.
It was trash. It was junk. It was worn out, it was broken. But being, mechanically minded and hardworking, our maintenance people at Fort Carson made that stuff operational.
So we ordered new tracks, the pads, the links, and the pins. And Fort Carson said, no, those vehicles have exceeded their life. Therefore, you can't put new tracks on these old vehicles. Catch-22. So we ordered parts, and our soldiers, night after night, would sit in the motor pool and put tracks together to put on these beat-up, broken-down vehicles.
When you get farmers, they're acquainted with machinery and stuff like that, and they pretty well know what to do and take over.
Squeeze off round, very good.
Then we got the ultimate insult when Fort Carson said, you guys are not qualified to carry guns. And we said, for God's sake, everybody in this battalion has been to basic training in AIT at a regular Army post, and their records so reflect.
During this class, we're going to use the coach and pupil method.
And the Fort Carson said, you are going to have to start over with, this is a gun. And the bullet goes in here and it comes out here.
When you learn the correct firing technique and the position, you'll be able to direct good fire, well-aimed fire in a combat situation.
And what they were doing was they were accusing us of falsifying the records of 873 people.
Once we then could start going out and training with the tracks, everybody was familiar with the track vehicles and how we ran operations out of them.
We would load up the troops and move them with the tracks up until where they were deployed. And then you'd leave the tracks and go on foot.
In the training period, we had the Command Maintenance Management Inspection, which is conducted by civilians. They come into your unit with a vengeance. What they check is, if you're short this, is it on requisition? I want to see the requisition. They check everything minutely. We got the highest score ever recorded at Fort Carson with the junk they gave us.
5th Mech came down to us and said, would you be willing to come and instruct the rest of the active component brigades on how you prepare for the mate inspection? And so we did that. And I think at that point in time, the active component began to appreciate the capabilities of the Guard.
Company B, commanded by Bud Amundsen, was the first company to go through the company test. It was umpired by a lieutenant colonel from regular Army. The first night, B Company was doing a night withdrawal, and Bud withdrew his company with blackout drive or no light whatsoever. And when they left to occupy a new position some miles away, I was with the lieutenant colonel umpire, and I said, what do you think of the unit so far, sir? He said, well, we're not quite done yet. And he called his umpires, and he said, walk the platoon positions, use your flashlights, and let me know how many people they left behind and how much equipment. And so we just sat there, and I'm praying. And time passed, and pretty soon each of the umpires reported in and said, nothing, 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 nothing. So then he said, Major Lally, about your question. He said, I commanded a platoon in World War II, a company in Korea, and a battalion in Vietnam. And this is the finest rifle company I ever saw. What a compliment. And the other two companies followed in turn.
We thought at the time is the 2nd Mech was going to go to war, meaning we would literally deploy to Vietnam as a unit, which turns up not to be the case at all.
War was not going well. Civilian attitudes were bad.
Then the Army made the political decision that we better not have 4 or 5 guys from Ida Grove or Shelvin killed in one day.
7, 9, 5.
And that was a terrible blow to us because we were really feeling strapped. And I think we were. I think we would have done very, very well in Vietnam.
From my own perspective, I would have far more preferred to go to Vietnam with my fellow National Guard soldiers. But that wasn't the case. We went as fillers.
When you went there, you was just put in with another unit. One guy would leave and you'd take his place. And so you could learn from the other people.
We used to have a battalion formation, and the whole battalion would line the street. The following people had been levied, and they call your name, and you're it. They kept having these levies every week. We just wondered when our number would come up, and you don't know where you're going or who you're going to be with, and that's kind of scary, you know, because you have the unit integrity that you're breaking up.
I got my notice in December, and so I came home for a 30-day leave before I went to Vietnam. I left the day President Nixon was sworn into office is when I left for Vietnam.
My dad was in the military in World War II, and he was in the Battle of the Bulge. And my dad was pretty hardcore guy, very nice guy, but pretty straightforward. My wife, who was a brand new wife to me, she'd only been married a couple of months, and my dad sent me off from the airport here, and it was probably the very first time that I ever seen my dad choke up because I'm leaving.
When we touched down, that base come under attack. And they hurried us off the plane and got us to bunkers. You know, we can hear all the shooting and stuff. So that was my first sound of combat. Why the hell did I volunteer for that?
As soon as that door popped open, you could smell it. It was a combination of trash, burnt rubber, garbage. I don't know if you notice right now, but I'm shaking.
After you're there for a while, of course, you get accustomed to the smell and you don't smell anything anymore. But it was extremely hot and it had terrible odor.
Burning human waste with diesel fuel is not the most pleasant smell in the world. And everywhere you went, that's the way they handled things.
We get off the plane and we're still together now, and we're being processed through Benoit and going through all the routines, the orientations, and then the orders start to come in. Lala, you're going here. Gunderson, you're going here. Whatever that distribution might be, and the first thing you know, we're going different directions. And at that moment, you're all your own. You were by yourself.
Warrant Officer Bally, the supply officer, he was the first one picked. He reported to a helicopter company, and the major told him, Mr. Barley, the supply situation in this unit is completely out of control. Well, Barley being Barley, I mean, he was a very outspoken person. He had that mess straightened out in one heck of a hurry. Well, the company commander was so impressed that he said, are there any more like you? And Barley said, oh yes. He said, there's a whole bunch of them, here are their names. And this major said, I'll pick them up. And he did.
My thought was, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm a National Guardsman. I was billeted with a bunch of second lieutenants, crying about the fact that they had to go to Vietnam. I called them a sorry bunch of wimps. I told them I'm a National Guardsman, and I said, I'm a better soldier than you'll ever be. 3 or 4 days later, I got orders to report to Group Commander, the Transportation Group up north. I went into his office and saluted and said, Sir, Warrant Officer John H. Grody, I'm an Iowa Army National Guardsman. I'm here to do the best damn job I can do for you.
When I got to Vietnam, I went to the 1st Division, being field grade. I was interviewed by the G1 of the division, and he was looking at my Form 66, officer qualification. And he said, good heavens, you have done everything there is to do in the infantry. He said, that's absolutely fabulous. And then he was stunned into disbelief, and he said, oh my God, you're a National Guard officer. And I said, yes. And he said, well, you know, we can't give these career positions to National Guard officers. We have to save those for our regulars. He said, I think I can find something for you in the division rear. So I said, well, you have one of our guys as a company commander. And he said, who's that? I said, Captain Bob McManus. And he said, McManus is a National Guard officer? And I said, yes, sir. He's from my battalion. And he said, he's one of our best company commanders. And he said, I'm sending you to the 1st Brigade. So McManus's reputation saved me from having some flunky job.
Yes, sir.
When I got over there, I became part of the 101st Airborne. And I did not know for sure what I was getting into, but it seemed to go all right.
I was an infantry platoon sergeant. I had 42 guys with me in the infantry.
So here I am. I've left Benoit. I'm in the 25th Division at Cu Chi. And they said the Triple Deuce, 2nd of the 22nd Infantry, which was a Mech outfit, is having some rough days up in Dao Tiang, and we want you to go up there. What that means is I'm now being sent to the Triple Deuce to replace a couple of lieutenants who had just been lost. The reason I was assigned to the Mech outfit in the first place is because of my Mech experience in the Guard. I was assigned to 2 platoons in Vietnam, a rifle platoon first, and then later as a scout platoon leader. And in both assignments, my guard experience, my mechanic training, my days in 2nd of 133 growing up as a lieutenant paid off big time for me.
I ended up in B Troop, 10th Cavalry, Pleiku, Ankei area. I was on a 113 personnel carrier. We had a 50 caliber on the turret and a 60 on each side with a shield. The floor was lined with ammunition. I mean, between 50 cal and M60 ammo, we were loaded for bear. We looked for Charlie.
I was assigned to Team 3, which is an advisory team to the 1st ARVN Division, an infantry division on the DMZ. And we had responsibility for what they called the 11th Division Tactical Area, which ran all the way from the DMZ down to Da Nang.
360th Transportation in Cam Ranh Bay. That was considered an R&R center for most of the guys. But I'm here to tell you, it wasn't an R&R center for me. I was supposed to be a light-duty vehicle driver. But when I got there, it wasn't a light-duty vehicle driver, because what they showed me was a multi-fuel 6-wheel drive, and it pulls a 5,000-gallon fuel tanker. And they said, here you are, this is going to be your truck, and when you learn how to drive that, you'll be on convoy at 3 o'clock in the morning.
They send me up to this medical battalion in Chulai. I didn't know what it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a motor officer. But I get up there, and that isn't what they had planned for me. They had a property book officer. And this medical battalion had a couple $1 million worth of equipment and no accounting whatsoever.
I was assigned to the 4th to 31st 196 Infantry, and I reported to Top, First Sergeant, and he took one look at my orders, and gee, you must be one bad son of a bitch to be sent over here. What the hell did you do to get sent over here? Nothing, First Sergeant. Well, of course the word gets out, and so that was my nickname, NG.
So I report to Company A of the Triple Deuce, and those 4 squad leaders and that platoon sergeant didn't even care where I graduated from high school or what the source of my commission was. What they wanted was a lieutenant. What they really want to know is that you care about them. If you translate that and you listen carefully. Now in combat there's some tough days, there's some tough nights, sometimes you don't sleep at all. I mean these are tough conditions. But if the soldiers have an understanding or an appreciation that you're with them, it changes everything.
We operated out of a fire base called Fort Buffalo. We were really blessed. Half a mile away there was a 155 battery, and they were good support. Normally, the rotation was one day in the fire base doing guard, and then you were out in the bush for 3 days. You'd be in a group of 3 113s in a tank or 3 113s in the mortar carrier, and you go out and set up a small perimeter. We'd go out there and we'd start popping those 40 millimeter grenades out of our 203s just to let them know, we're here, come and get us. M113s were actually gas, they weren't diesel. So an explosion was a torch. If an RPG, a rocket propelled grenade, hit it, you were dead. So we rode on top. Had a lot of bullets fired at me. I had a lot of bullets I fired back. I do not know that I killed anyone. I never saw anyone that I was shooting at. I was merely returning fire or just firing. I saw my own friends hit, hurt, dead, and that hurt. one of our patrols was hit. One of the KIAs was NVA. We were going through his personal belongings. And we went through his billfold, and here's a picture of his wife and his family. He's a soldier too. And it's part of being a soldier is being willing to die. I was blessed to live.
I was basic on LZ Baldy. The engineers had just completed 2 bunkers out of plywood, and the walls are 3 foot thick, and they put gravel and rock and whatever concrete in those walls. But I was assigned to be on a bunker guard on bunker 13. I offered a guy money to trade places because the fighting position I was going to be on was a pile of sandbags, rotting sandbags. And I didn't consider that to be as safe as a brand new bunker. It was common knowledge then is that if you're on perimeter guard, you stand guard either on top or behind, because RPGs would penetrate and then explode inside. Early in the morning, about 3 in the morning, there was 4 of us on per bunker, and one of the guys poked me. "Did you hear that?" And out in the distance in the wire, we could hear in English, "Hey GI, you awake?" I was standing behind the bunker at that time, and they fired an RPG at our position. And I remember seeing it. It was like a ball of fire coming at me. Well, it hit sandbags in front of me. It wounded several of the guys that I was with, just knocked me down. The bunker I wanted to go to, where this window Weston was, they were inside the bunker, all 4 of them. And they hit it with an RPG, and all 4 were killed. Was I scared? Of course I was scared. And you don't know until it happens what you're gonna do. What I can say is the training comes back. The training you had in boot camp and the training that I had at Fort Carson, that comes back. The first thing was said to me, "NG, you didn't run." Well, were they expecting National Guard to pick up and run? No, we're not running.
There's nothing like the stress of combat. Nothing in the world like the stress of combat. I have no idea how I ever got out of there. A certain amount of luck, a certain amount of skill, a certain amount of seasoning for having been in combat long enough to just be really, really sensitive to when there's a booby trap and when there's not. I'll tell you that the enemy that we were facing in the region we were working, this was a clever, clever soldier. They would slip a mine or a series of mines into places, and they were hard to detect because of the way they covered and concealed these things. One day, I think, I quit counting. One day we had 90-some booby traps. When I was in country, I was in combat almost straight through. You understand there's enormous risk, but as a lieutenant, your obligation is to look after your soldiers. And if that affects you personally in any kind of way, you mentally work beyond that, because the soldiers are what's important. If a lieutenant starts to worry about their own life, then you got some trouble. You care about them as a human being. It's not about a soldier you worked with. It's about a human being who shared the same trials, tribulations, challenges, and all the rest of the things that you put up with.
I was in the Assault Valley all the time, and it's so thick with vegetation. A lot of times you couldn't see the sky. Our job was to hunt down the enemy and make contact with them. Met a lot of nice guys. To this day, I can't tell you all of them's names, and I didn't want to learn their names when I was there, you know. If something happened to one of them and it was my call that they got killed or something, then I thought I'd be, you know, thinking about that being my fault. So I learned their last names, but I never put it clear in my head where I'd remember it all the time. We'd get up just before daylight. I'd go around to all the positions, make sure everybody was up, and we'd stay alert for about an hour, then the sun come up. Then we'd eat breakfast, we'd pack up, and we'd start walking again. At night, just before dark, stop, eat, set up our night positions, and start all over again. Everybody looked after everybody. We never left nobody. If he got wounded, there's 4 or 5 guys that were taking care of that guy, and if we moved, he moved with us.
I bumped into First Sergeant J.P. Cook of Mapleton. And I said, "J.P., for God's sake, how would I bump?" Yeah, we had a great reunion. Well, he said, "We're leaving." They're out on the runway. A little while later, a soldier came running in, all stained with the red dirt of Vietnam. And he said, "I'm looking for a Major Lally." I said, "That's me." And he said, "Sir, Sergeant Cook wants you on the runway right away." And I said, "Well, let's go." And I ran out there, and J.P. Cook had lined up about 10 guys from the Iowa National Guard. And he had culled them from all these people. Must have been 1,000 of them out there. And he had them all lined up. And then he said something like, "Iowa National Guard, pitch hot." Then he said, "Ready for inspection, sir." And so I trooped the line, and as I went along, I wanted to hug him. But we shook hands, and when I got towards the end, I was going faster and faster because I knew I was breaking, just like I'm breaking now. It was just marvelous. But it's a great moment. I treasure it.
It's a complete array. It's not one thing. The sun shines over there just like it does here. And you got your good days, and you got your bad days, and you got your dangerous days. I mean, it just is. If they could stop the convoys, that means they stopped airstrikes, because we hauled gasoline, jet fuel. It wasn't uncommon to see if you had a bullet hole in your truck. There was no real good roads over there. From Cameron Bay to Phan Rang, they finally put in a 20-mile stretch of asphalt. The rest of the roads everywhere was just dirt roads. And a lot of times bridges and the like were blown up. Basically a 50-mile drive was an all-day job. The mail keeps you going forward. My wife wrote me every day. That kept my spirits alive. It's so refreshing to have somebody keep an umbilical cord to home.
Senior advisor called me in, said, "I got a battalion combat assaulting into Barrier Island south of Da Nang. It's an NVA training base." I said, "When?" He said, "You need to leave now, because the combat assault's going to happen in a matter of a couple hours." They lived in holes basically all day and came out at night and did their thing. That night was interesting. We landed, made our perimeter. Well, in the middle of the night, all of a sudden, we got them right in the middle of our perimeter because they were in the holes, and they popped up out of the holes after dark, and lo and behold, the firefight was right in the middle of the perimeter. We were in direct contact with the enemy for 41 straight days. We went in the jungle for periods of 30 days, and we just worked in the jungle trying to make contact with the enemy. My ankles used to get so sore because you were never on the level. You're going up, you're going down. It was triple canopy jungle. Our resupply was whenever we got to an area where there was a clearing. They used these 10,000-pound bombs, and they drop them on the ridges and knock the trees down, and then we could get a helicopter in, and they would come in, and we would evacuate any wounded or dead, and they would drop off some food supplies to us and mail, and then that's basically how we lived. Biggest issue was water. We wouldn't be by a stream or anywhere, and you had to be really cautious with your water consumptions because you'd live on what you had until the next time you got to a stream where you could fill them up. When we were moving, we would move and then we would stop in the evening and we would set up our bivouac site. Then we would wait until it got dark, and then we would move about a mile after dark, and then we would set up our night site that we'd stay. It proved to be very beneficial because there's many a night when those pre-existing, the earlier site got mortared or fired upon. Your senses get so good. Toward the end, I heard the mortar rounds coming out of the mortar tubes, and I was in the foxhole before the first one ever hit the ground. And I was sound asleep. So it's how keen your senses become in those situations.
My fellow Americans, not long ago I received a letter from a woman in the Midwest.
President Johnson at the time said we're gonna cut short these National Guard tours, and then so those of us who were in Vietnam might have had a couple of months to go on a year tour. By then we went home early.
I get orders one day, it says, "Happy Thanksgiving, you're going home."
When I got back in to Cameron Bay, I got my truck and trailer and everything all lined up to be refueled so we could take back off again. Here comes the first sergeant, picks me up at my truck. He says, "Jump in." So I jump in, we head back. He says, "Grab what you can because you're going home." I says, "Really?"
Each day more and more second Mechers come into the post. When the airplane was full, that was all second Mech. I think every damn seat was second Mech person.
They fly us back to the United States, and that was really something because as soon as the plane, you could feel the wheels leave the ground. I mean, it was just a joyous cry of relief.
We flew from Cameron Bay to Tokyo, and I can still remember as we're circling the airport, it was back to the world.
The flight from Colorado Springs via Denver to Sioux City was just filled with guys coming home. And the family, of course, was at the airport.
I had 2 girls at home, and that's what I wanted to see. When I got off the plane and started walking out and I seen them, that was my happy time.
Got home, and it was just after Thanksgiving, and it was so good to be home.
We must say no! Where are we gonna go?
I wasn't sure that we should be there, but I did the best job I could because my government sent me there. So that was my responsibility to them, to do the best good. And I was very disappointed when I got back and found out that Vietnam returnees were being treated by the American population.
The issue was that when we came back, the war was going very badly. And Kent State had happened, and it was just a horrible, horrible environment to try to resurrect the military out of.
It really hurts my heart, to see, and remember people back during that time, how they dishonored the military uniform by spitting at soldiers. But back in the 60s and 70s, to wear the uniform, sometimes you just had to be a little careful about doing that because you could be you know, accosted or assaulted.
When you're in the airport, especially from where we came, you're not welcomed home as a hero's welcome at all. Harassment here isn't going to be anything like where I just came from. So it don't make any difference. That was the last time I put the uniform on. I've never had it on again. Not that I think it was bad, it's just that I never had anything, I never had any of my medals, I never got anything. I didn't want anything. I'm home. I got the highest rank there is, civilian.
I was kind of happy to leave, but the only thing that crossed my mind is all the guys that were there, you know. If any more got hurt or killed or anything, you know, but. And then after that, the war kind of just slowly quit, you know.
We say in the Army, never leave a fallen comrade. And it's tough some days. Corp Tyndall died trying to save another soldier. As you think about that person, beautiful wife, kid. Corp Tyndall was a mentor of mine, and I won't see him again for a while.
The first time I went to the Vietnam Wall, my son was at the Naval Academy, and he went with me. And I wouldn't let them come with me the first time. I had them wait at the end of one of the wings of the wall, and I went there. I was knelt down in front of his name, and I was openly sobbing like a baby. And I felt these hands on my shoulder. It was other Vietnam vets.
I was tracing across the names, looking for Corbin C. Tyndall from the Mars. And when I touched his name, I burst into tears. And I stood there, helpless, absolutely out of control, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't believe this happened to me. And I moved on to the next one, Ron Buchanan, from Sioux City. And I just cried and cried and went through all the rest of them. And then I said, what in hell happened to me? What is it about this place? And then there was the realization. It was like the soldiers are behind that wall. And when you touch their name, they reach out and they touch your finger to say thank you. Thank you for remembering. I go to daily mass and I pray for them every day.
The quality of the soldiers who we share duty with, unlike any other, it's a special group of people. So I'm proud to be a part of that. I could go on a list of soldiers in the 2nd Mech, leaders in the 2nd Mech. These are the people that set aside a piece of their life to help me. With almost 43 years in uniform, what I dedicated myself to doing as I moved through the ranks is helping people like others help me. So you become a family even though you're not a biological family. So you care about one another. In the infantry, fighting positions need to be mutually supporting. What are you doing? You're looking after your buddy. And so there's an unusual relationship, the bond you ask about, in terms of is anyone in the military. And it's a bond that can only be understood and perhaps fully appreciated when you're there.
You know, don't tell these guys that, but I love these guys. They are special, very special.
Do solemnly swear.
You know, you take that oath when you're sworn in, you're never sworn out.
I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Anybody that's served in the military, and I don't care if it's National Guard or Air Guard or regular service, each one of us is given a job, and you do your job to the best of your ability, and you should be honored for that service. And it's unfortunately the American public doesn't do that.
Dynamite 5-2, request dust off.
Too many bad things. I don't like to talk about that stuff, you know. The good things is all right. You know, things that happen, I don't think it's nothing to brag about, you know. And I don't think it's no great thing to kill somebody, you know. And over there, they're just killing back and forth, and that's part of war. I understand that. But how can you feel good about it? Yeah, it's, I never did talk about that stuff too much, but.
May 12th, I can't forget that. I can't forget that because, and not only because David Leffler was killed on the same LZ at the same time, but a guy I wanted to switch places with and offered him money to switch places died instead of me. Why did I survive? And maybe that's why I've been involved so much with my community and doing different things. That got to do that extra because you were spared. You got to do that extra. So I'm doing the extra. But it is a possibility that there was some other instances that I was involved in where I don't want to remember.
Well, I got to be honest with you, I've not really talked this story much. And not that I'm trying to be Rambo or any of that, I just didn't think it was needed to be brought up. Then all of a sudden you get to be, you know, 45, 50 years later, I'm fortunate in that I'm able to dismiss a lot of things in my mind. So to say I lived my life thinking about all that, I didn't. I was able to put it away. And I think that was a blessing that I it's not something you want to dwell on. Or for me, I don't. Guys like war stories, I guess. I don't know if they do. I don't. So